We are looking at looping statements or iteration statements. One of them is the while loop, and this is how it is. I'm going to run this example, show you what it does, and then we'll talk about how it does that. So it prints 0, 1, 2. Loops through 3 times. I'm going to set a breakpoint this now and look at what's going on behind the scene. So very first statement is I declare a variable int type called counter, set its value to 0. Then I have a while loop. I type while, within parentheses I have a condition. While counter is less than 3, within braces, whatever the lines of code you put in, execute those. If not, just skip over and go to line number 25. So at this point, counter, if you look down here, counter is 0. Is 0 less than 3? Yes. So I'm expecting to nslog, you know how that goes. In the previous tutorials we talked about it. Print out the value of counter to log. Here it goes 0 and it's 0 here. Increment counter by 1. If you don't do that, the counter will always be less than 3 and it'll become an infinite loop. It'll just go on forever. So that's an essential part of the while loop, to increment your counter. Now the counter increments to 1. Is 1 less than 3? Yes. So write its value to the log, increment. At this point, line number 22, counter becomes 2. Is 2 less than 3? Yes. Increment by 1, counter becomes 3. Is 3 less than 3? No. So we're going to skip over, go to line number 26, and we are done. So that's how you are using an integer value, if that's what you want to do. Now let me show you another using a Boolean variable, a while loop using a Boolean variable. So I'm going to declare the counter is a Boolean type, and I'm going to set its value to true. Here I'm going to remove this one. So essentially that means while counter is true. Of course I cannot do this. It's not a integer value, so I'm gonna have to remove that one and see what it does. Is counter. Right here you see counter Boolean in hex 1. 1 is true, 0 is false. So at this point counter is true. So it's gonna write it to the log right there. Next iteration, is counter true? Yeah, it's true. We never changed its value. So it's gonna keep going on and on and on forever. It'll be an infinite loop. Luckily I'm in a debugger, so I can stop the debugger and kill the process. So what you need to do is combine it with an if statement. So you'll have some kind of a statement, a check. If 1 is equal to 1, which is, I'm going to set its value to false. Of course, you are not going to have as simple as 1 is equal to 1. You will be doing some kind of a decision making. You could even be calling a method right there, or having doing some more testing at line number 22, or between line 21 and 22, making some calculations, making some decisions. And if that turns out to be true, set the counter to false. Let's run this application. Is counter true at this point? Yes, so it's going to spit it out to the log right there. If 1 is equal to 1, well, for simplicity, it's always true. Counter is false now. You see how it changes to 0. At this point, after line 26, it's going to go back to line number 20 and make another check. Is counter true at this point? No. So it's going to skip over and go to line number 29. And yes, it does. It's done. So that's how you can use a Boolean variable in a while loop. Now it doesn't have to be in an integer or a boolean. It could be a call to a method that returns true or false, or if you are using an integer and a string, and you as we saw in the previous tutorials, you can use the AND or to create a more complex decision. If you see my previous tutorials, you know how I was explaining the if statement and how you can have a more complex a decision statement using ampersand signs and all that stuff. If you watch that, you could, you know, make a more complex decision here. It could even be a call to a method right here, and in the method you call a web service or a database, and if everything goes okay, you keep going and have criteria to stop in that method. So this could be a call to a method. So you can get pretty creative using the in the while loop. You are not limited to using integer or one integer or a boolean. It could be a lot more than that. Another relative of the while loop is the do while loop. And the special thing about do while loop is it runs at least once. Because in your while loop, if the condition is true, in the very first line, it will never run. So you could have some situations where it never runs. But the do while does run at least once. So that's how it goes. The first line would be do, and the while statement or your decisions come down here. Now again, you can have an integer or a boolean just like we had in the while loop. So I've just changed the previous example, do here, and move the while down there, and let's look at what it does. Do, there's no check, so it's going to run line number 21 always. So now I'm making a if statement. I'm setting counter to false, and I'm checking is while true. At this point it's not, so it's going to just skip over and end. So I'm going to change this. I am going to set boolean to false, and I'm going to remove this statement, and I'm going to run this. Well, boolean is false at this point, but it's running line number 21 anyway, and that's the point of the do while loop. The check is the last line, and you know, then it turns and finishes up. So it's going to run at least once. You see it ran once, and then it ended. The counter being an integer value and being a call to a method and being a more complex decision criteria still apply to the do while loop. If you read books about Objective-C, they'll give you a while loop using an integer, and I hope you find it useful, you know, different examples, and probably you'll have to read many books and articles and not even get all this information that you are getting in 5-10 minutes. So I hope you like it and find it useful. Thanks. Bye.